Queen's music has vibrated across the globe for decades. Their grand choruses, lavish instrumentation, and killer stage shows made for electric concerts that were some of the best the world has ever seen. But even these rock and roll Hall of Famers weren't immune to missteps and controversy. From career-threatening albums to public battles over Freddie Mercury's sexuality, Queen was no stranger to conflict. But few instances in Queen's history can match the infamy of their 1981 Latin America tour. What happened during their visit to Puebla that caused fans and audience-goers alike to revolt against the beloved group? Queen got their start in Britain, so their foray into English-speaking foreign countries like America and Canada made perfect sense. At the same time, they had a massive growing fan base in Latin America too. But the late 1900s, early 80s was a difficult time globally, and many Latin American countries were facing a particularly dark period. This meant that Queen couldn't freely tour there like they could everywhere else. So when it finally came time for the band to go live, the band was just as hyped as the fans were. It seemed like a dream come true for everyone, but that's not exactly how things turned out. At the time, many countries in the region were facing oppressive control by military regimes and even dictatorships. These strict governments led to economic disparity and a slew of social outcries and general unrest. Songs like Another One Bites the Dust and Crazy Little Thing Called Love were all the rage back then, and their themes of rebellion and escape deeply inspired Latin America audiences. So Queen eventually made it to the region in 1981, and this would be their first and only full-fledged tour of Latin America. The tour began on February 28th with back-to-back concerts at Estadio Vélez Sarsfield in Buenos Aires, where Queen managed to draw a crowd of over 300,000 people. At the time, it was the largest concert crowd in Argentine history, but those stats don't tell the full story. Queen performed these concerts during what was known as Argentina's Dirty War, a period of intense state violence, so life was incredibly difficult there.
A dirty war, that's what the Argentines called it. But when it was going on in the middle 70s, no one knew the extent of it. Now they do.
In fact, the concerts were initially met with fierce resistance from the military regime, which feared a gathering of so many young people could spell disaster for their control. To secure the shows, Queen's manager Jim Beach was forced to negotiate directly with high-ranking officials, including the acting military dictator, General Roberto Viola. But this debut concert would foreshadow the chaos that was to come at the end of their tour in Puebla. At the time, stadiums were sometimes used as makeshift prisons, and moats were built around them to prevent people from escaping. While Queen knew the dire situation and even brought their own artificial turf to cover the grounds to make the places more habitable, everyone there knew the horrors of what had gone on just days earlier. Queen later went on to play in Brazil at Estadio do Morumbi in São Paulo. Here, the band had one of their most moving moments throughout their entire career, maybe only second to their Live Aid show, which we covered in a video, so if you haven't seen that one yet, be sure to like this video and head over there to check it out right after this one. During their Brazil show, practically all 130,000 attendees sang along to Love of My Life. This heartfelt moment helped put Brazil on the map for other international bands. And of course, we know Brazil today is one of the staples for bands on tour, and it's known for some of the craziest concerts around. So you can definitely thank Queen for helping to shed some light on the awesome culture of Brazil. While this series of concerts was Queen's only full-fledged tour of Latin America, Brazil left such a positive impact on the band that they would later return to the country one more time in 1985 for the Rock in Rio festival. They performed to a staggering 300,000-strong crowd on each of their 2 nights, 6 years before Freddie Mercury's untimely death in 1991. We also just released a new video detailing the story around Freddie's untimely death, so now you have even more Queen content to enjoy after this video. Things got abnormal once more when they went to Venezuela. Queen had originally planned for 3 shows in the city of Caracas, but only got to play 1 because shortly after they arrived, the country went into a state of national mourning out of respect for the former president, Romulo Betancourt, who had just passed away. Then came their Mexico shows. So what happened during their Mexico shows that could have been worse than the political conditions in Argentina? Well, their first show in Monterrey was shaky but not terrible. Queen performed on October 9, 1981 at the University Stadium. One minor incident occurred when a ramp fell and caused minor injuries to some fans, but then came their 2 shows in Puebla, where things got a bit more dicey. The band also planned shows at Guadalajara and Mexico City, but they had to cut these venues following the incidents at Puebla. Much like Argentina, this was a time when Mexico wasn't doing its best politically, economically, or socially. The infrastructure was failing in many areas, with venues either being unsafe or too torn up for proper concert security. Like Argentina, the Mexican government also acted as a roadblock for the band, and the poor economic climate also meant that most bands simply couldn't justify bringing their act there. Queen went against the grain, but it didn't exactly pay off for them. In Puebla, the band took to the Ignacio Zaragoza Olympic Stadium. Here, fans were a bit less loving than Queen's Brazilian crowd. Attendees were openly drinking and abusing substances, which is often a recipe for disaster. These rowdy crowds had attitudes that clashed with legit fans who traveled from around the country to see Queen. Ultimately, this meant the actual fans got upset because they had to deal with belligerent people all around them, and the drunken people were already in the mood to cause trouble, so both sides were already upset going into the show. Queen had no idea this sort of situation was brewing in the audience, so what happened next is kind of obvious in hindsight. Fans aren't in agreement over the exact point in the show, but a certain incident happened either during their operatic masterpiece Bohemian Rhapsody or their newly released hit Another One Bites the Dust. At some point during one of these songs, Mercury left the stage and returned with an oversized, if not giant, sombrero. By this point, Freddie was already well known for his outlandish attire. He was all about that glam rock lifestyle, so a larger-than-life sombrero was just his crazy take on the traditional Mexican attire. He simply hoped it would be a prop that would connect with fans. The sombrero was a big reveal during an already climactic moment, meant to hype the crowd up even more. But that's not exactly how things went down. The rowdy crowd didn't take kindly to the gesture. Offended, a group in the crowd began to whistle and throw their shoes. Things quickly escalated, with others throwing socks full of dirt and even bottles at the band. In spite of the actual assault on the band, they didn't stop playing. After the crowd began to throw things, some attendees recall Freddie spitting water at people in the front rows, which further annoyed the crowd, which further incited their anger. The thing is, Mercury was known for this act as just one of his quirks. Of course, he probably could have read the room a little better and maybe skipped that part of his presentation, because it clearly didn't help the situation. The Puebla incident is a powerful reminder of how crucial it is to read the cultural room before making a grand gesture. Freddie's gesture clearly wasn't meant to mock the culture, but it's all about context. Mexico was facing some of the worst conditions in Latin America at the time. Their citizens were ravaged by violence and poverty-stricken. The last thing they wanted to see was a foreign rich man appearing to treat their national symbols as a frivolous costume. However, the altercation wasn't exactly one-sided. When the situation was reaching a boiling point, Queen left the stage, but Freddie clapped back with a couple scathing lines. "Thank you very much, Puebla. Mexico, thank you for the shoes. Goodbye, friends. Motherfuckers, goodbye, you bunch of tacos." Freddie's personal assistant, Peter Phoebe Freestone, recalled the deeper issues behind the revolt, saying, as the audience was being led into the stadium, the police searched everybody looking for recording equipment. The problem arose when the police on the inside of the venue were then selling the batteries back to the fans. Obviously, the fans weren't happy about this, and some thought the band were getting some of this money and started throwing things at the stage. Things were chaotic all across the board. Even outside the arena, there were reports of looting and people breaking in to see the show for free. International venues of this caliber were new to Mexican businesses, and the event organizers were unprepared and unequipped to handle such a crazy situation. Despite the mark against Queen's amazing legacy and all the problems the venue caused, their show is still considered one of the most important concerts in Mexican history. Some say the impact of the show helped turn Mexican venues into one of the biggest music markets in all of Latin America. So while Queen didn't have a warm welcome at Puebla, they still managed to help the Mexican music industry with their unceasing sensationalism. That's the story of the time Queen's audience revolted against them. What would you have done if you were there that day in Puebla? Do you think Freddie went too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, remember to click that like button and subscribe for all the best music content on YouTube.